blinding snowstorm sweeps across the exposed plateau near Luxembourg in January 1945. Corporal Toby Mercer sits behind the steering wheel of an open-topped command jeep, his heavy leather gloves frozen stiff against the metal rim. Tucked into the collar of his wool jacket is a piece of frayed yellow telephone wire, tied into a crude makeshift collar beside the jeep's front tire. Shivering violently in 4 inches of fresh snow is a small, scruffy terrier mix puppy with matted brown fur and a torn left ear. The dog had followed the vehicle tracks out of a destroyed farmyard, whimpering softly against the howling Arctic wind when General George S. Patton steps out of division headquarters and walks toward his command jeep, his face set in a hard scowl against the bitter cold. An escort MP quickly moves to kick the stray dog out of the way before the general reaches the running board. Mercer leans over the side of the vehicle, his heart pounding in his chest. "Don't kick him, sir," Mercer says, his voice cutting through the blizzard. "He's just trying to get out of the storm." The MP freezes, his boot raised in mid-air, shocked that a corporal would challenge a security officer in front of the commanding general of the Third Army. Patton stops dead in his tracks 3 feet from the passenger door. He looks down at the shivering puppy, then up at Mercer's anxious face. The entire escort detail goes motionless in the freezing wind. What happened in the next 30 seconds would reveal a quiet, gentle side of George S. Patton that few soldiers ever witnessed. And the answer was not what anyone in that snowstorm was prepared for. If you want more untold stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring these forgotten moments of courage and quiet leadership directly to you every single week. Let me back up a second, because to understand what happened when a stray dog approached George S. Patton's Jeep in January 1945, you need to understand the absolute brutality of the winter campaign in Luxembourg. The Ardennes offensive had turned the border region into a frozen wasteland of sub-zero temperatures and blinding blizzards. Military vehicles were operating under strict operational protocols. Every cubic inch of space on command half-tracks and jeeps was reserved for vital radio gear, maps, weapons, and emergency fuel cans. Stray animals wandering into military encampments were viewed as potential security hazards, disease vectors, or tactical distractions, routinely cleared away by camp guards. In Patton's Third Army, cleanliness, order, and strict protocol were enforced with iron discipline. Command jeeps were expected to be immaculate, free of unnecessary clutter, mud, or unauthorized pets. Every MP and staff officer standing in that snowstorm was making the exact same mental calculation. They knew Patton's fierce reputation for demanding pristine military order. They knew the consequences of interrupting a general's movement for a stray animal. They expected Patton to order the dog removed immediately and reprimand the driver for speaking out of line. The emotional stakes in that frozen landscape went far beyond army regulations. War strips away everything down to bare survival, leaving a cold arithmetic of loss, destruction, and isolation. The human math was simple and profound. In a landscape where thousands of men were dying in icy trenches, a single gesture of kindness toward a helpless creature was a vital tether to human decency. A small animal freezing in the snow carried zero tactical weight. Yet ignoring its suffering threatened to erode the very humanity soldiers were fighting to protect. If a command staff loses its capacity for basic empathy, the moral foundation of why an army fights begins to crumble. The moral balance could not be ignored, and that was the snowbank Toby Mercer made his plea in. Picture the scene outside that Luxembourg headquarters in January 1945. 6 men are gathered around an open command jeep as howling winds whip clouds of white powder across the icy courtyard. The air smells of burning gasoline, freezing wool, canvas grease, and bitter frost. The sky is a leaden grey, heavy with impending darkness. As temperatures drop well below zero, through the swirling snow, the scruffy terrier puppy sits huddled against the jeep's heavy rubber tire, its small body trembling uncontrollably as it looks up with dark, frightened eyes. Standing near the bumper, Corporal Toby Mercer, a 22-year-old driver from Abilene, Texas, froze solid. He was not looking at the storm. He was staring at General George S. Patton, whose tall figure remained motionless beside the passenger door. Every guard in the courtyard performed the exact same calculation. They saw a corporal defending a stray dog in front of the army's most feared commander. They braced for an immediate blast of general authority. Stay with me, because what happened next in that snowstorm is the part nobody was expecting. The accounts that survive from that Luxembourg headquarters detail are remarkably consistent in shape. They come from the drivers and guards who stood frozen in the courtyard watching the doorway. They all remembered the exact weight of the silence before anyone moved. General Patton did not roar. Not the way a harsh commander reacts to a breach of camp order. Not the way a general looks at an unauthorized distraction during a battle campaign. He looked at the shivering terrier and Mercer's piece of yellow telephone wire the way a lifelong horseman looks at a loyal animal in distress. Without saying a single word, Patton unbuttoned his heavy wool trench coat. He reached down with his gloved hands, lifted the soaking, muddy puppy out of the snowbank, and tucked the small animal directly inside his warm jacket against his chest. He climbed into the passenger seat of the Jeep, pulled his heavy coat closed around the dog, and looked at Mercer. "He stays on the heater," Patton said quietly, his voice calm and gentle. "Let's get moving, Corporal." Mercer engaged the clutch, and the Jeep pulled out into the blinding storm, with the small terrier sleeping soundly on the engine heater vent under Patton's arm. Behind them, the MP stood speechless in the snow, watching the command vehicle disappear into the whiteout. Mercer later recalled that the warmth inside the Jeep that afternoon had nothing to do with the engine heater. See, what most folks don't realize is that George S. Patton had a lifelong, profound affection for animals, particularly dogs and horses, which he viewed as faithful companions bound to human destiny. Throughout his life, Patton was rarely seen without his beloved bull terrier, Willie, whom he treated with deep affection. He recognized that Mercer's concern for the stray pup was not insubordination. It was a reflection of the same protective, compassionate instinct that made him a reliable soldier. The math in Patton's mind was immediate and humane. Rescuing a shivering animal did not weaken an army's combat discipline. It reinforced the moral warmth essential to keeping men human in the midst of slaughter. To Patton, true courage encompassed both ruthless determination against the enemy and tender compassion for the weak. By holding the dog inside his coat, Patton was not compromising his warrior image. He was revealing the deep, unspoken humanity that underpinned his leadership. He transformed himself in that brief fragment of a minute from an intimidating general into a compassionate man who refused to leave a helpless creature to freeze in the snow. Corporal Toby Mercer was 22 years old, born and raised on a ranch near Abilene, Texas. His father was a cattle herder who taught him from childhood how to care for working ranch dogs, how to nurse weak calves through winter blizzards, and how never to abandon an animal in need. Before entering the army, Toby worked as a ranch hand, spending long days on horseback in all weather, learning how animals responded to gentle handling. In his collar, he kept a piece of yellow telephone wire he had fashioned into a leash, hoping one day to find a dog of his own after the war. He was engaged to a girl named Betty who worked at a local hardware store, and her weekly letters carried news of ranch life and plans for building a small home. Toby had a clear, practical plan: complete his service, return to Texas, buy a small parcel of grazing land, and raise cattle alongside a pair of loyal stock dogs. He was not a dramatic hero. He was a practical, kind-hearted cowboy who believed that caring for animals was a basic duty of manhood. The terrier, whom Patton named Scraps, stayed with 3rd Army Command for the remainder of the winter campaign, sleeping in the command car and keeping the general company during long night drives across Germany. When the war ended in May 1945, Patton arranged for Scraps to be adopted by a local Belgian farm family near Bastogne, ensuring the dog had a warm home and plentiful food for life. Mercer often looked back on that snowy afternoon in Luxembourg as the moment he truly understood the character of his commanding general. Reflecting on that cold day in Luxembourg in January 1945, an intriguing moral question presents itself to viewers today. Was General Patton right to allow a stray animal onto a military command vehicle, or should commanders enforce strict operational regulations regarding equipment and pets without exception? One view holds that maintaining absolute military discipline and equipment standards is necessary to prevent distractions during critical operations. The other view holds that showing mercy to animals and supporting human empathy elevates moral morale across the entire command. What do you think? Was Patton's action an inspiring display of human compassion, or a breach of standard military protocol? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join us for more untold stories of World War II every week.